very clustered in this. All right. Okay. So, will you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name's Anders Fremstad, and I teach in the economics department at Colorado State.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah. So let's start off first with where you grew up, and yes.
Yeah, I grew up in a little town, a little college town in South Dakota, Vermillion.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a professor in the political science department.
Oh, nice.
And my mom was a teacher in public school system.
That's awesome. And your child, how was your childhood like?
I had a great childhood. My parents both had, my dad particularly as a professor had quite a bit of flexibility in his job.
Yes.
So I saw my parents a bunch. And I lived in a small enough town, and my parents were sort of lenient enough with us that by the time I was 9 in third grade, I got to ride my bike wherever I wanted to. We'd go all over town, go to a friend's house. I didn't need permission to
Yes.
do stuff like that. So that was sort of cool.
Nice.
And what else? I got to travel a little bit as a young person. So I grew up in this tiny town in South Dakota, but
Yeah.
my dad had a Fulbright in Germany a couple times. So I spent second grade in a German classroom with German students, and that sort of expanded my world a little bit. And then
Wow.
in high school, I went and studied abroad in Germany again on my own with host parents through the Rotary Club. And that was a really exciting thing to do as well. And,
awesome.
Yeah, I had a good childhood.
Awesome. And okay, so you did that. And how was your trip in Germany like?
Well, when I was in second grade, it was, extremely scary to go to another country for the first time for myself and get dropped off in a classroom where I didn't understand a word of what was going on.
Yes.
And, it's an experience that, of course, a lot of people growing up in this country can relate to too, because we're a nation of immigrants, right? But as someone growing up in this country who already speaks English and so on, it's sort of a shock to have it happen to you. So I think that does teach you a certain thing. On the other hand, it took me about 3-4 months before I could sort of converse in a somewhat proficient way with my fellow second graders.
Yeah.
But I had my first best friend was in second grade,
Nice.
German, Christoph Rautenberg. He lived just down the street, and in that city, we also got to bike all over town and do our own thing without, parents watching us, so that was super cool.
Yeah.
And my class was really welcoming, actually, so,
awesome.
kudos to second graders for bringing people into the group who are sort of outsiders. I was a bit of a novelty, because there aren't that many American second graders in a German public school, but no, it was a wonderful experience.
Well, that's awesome. And so you went to Germany, and then when you came back, how did your experience change when you came back? When you went to Germany, and you're I believe in you said,
in my junior year in high school.
Yeah, junior year
when I
in
was
high
16, I think.
Yeah.
Or 17.
Yeah.
The difference there was I went without my parents.
Yeah.
Right, so I sort of got sent, and that was a sort of scary thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's what most kids do when they leave when they're 18 or after high school.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of scary, but it was also I was a little bit familiar with the language by then. I mostly could understand German. I'm actually terrible at speaking German still, and then I was as well. But I could understand it, so I could sit in class, I could understand, my peers and so on when they're talking about things. And I got a little homesick now and then. I missed my friends back home.
Yeah.
But for the most part, my high school friends were really welcoming too. And when you're 16 in Germany, you can legally drink beer and all sorts of things. That was very interesting, I thought. And the culture, I think, in Germany is really one where you're treated a bit more as an adult when you're, a teenager.
Wow.
And so, for example, I wasn't just able to travel around the city, but that year in Germany, I was allowed to travel around the country or travel around Europe a little bit on my own.
Wow.
And that was cool. And one of my friends from Vermillion came and visited us in the summer, and we went to Venice and Florence and Prague and Amsterdam and all the fun places. So, yeah.
That's awesome. uh, and you got to do that, and then yeah, so you got to do that. That's awesome. And then when you came back, what did you like go straight to high school?
I had one more year of high school. I did my senior year of high school.
Yeah.
And at that point, I mean, I had great friends in high school, and so it was really fun. I actually insisted if I was going to go abroad. My parents had put some pressure on me to do it. I didn't really want to do it. I wanted to stay with my friends in Vermilion. In retrospect, I'm glad I did do it. So I guess occasionally one should listen to one's parents when they tell you to do something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
But I had a great time, my senior year back in high school, and then I went off to college the next year. And then when I went off to college, that whole thing was, in some ways easier, I think, because I'd already left my parents once, and so on.
Yeah, and why did you what did you want to do when you were when you wanted to go to college, and why did you go to college?
Yeah, well, probably I went to college because I thought I was supposed to go to college mostly. I mean, that would be the honest answer. I thought was kind of expected. I mean, I was excited to go to college too. I went to Georgetown in D.C.
Oh wow!
I enrolled in the School of Foreign Service. It's because I wanted to be. I'd been, to one other country, or I guess a couple other countries at that point in my life. But I wanted to I was interested in international policy and in diplomacy, and my parents definitely encouraged me in that direction. My mom wanted me to become a diplomat in Switzerland or something like that, so she could come visit. But then, going off to Georgetown, that was also delightful, because all of a sudden, I grew up in this little town in South Dakota, and all of a sudden I was just surrounded by other people who want to be diplomats too, and so that was interesting. And so you went there, yeah. So you said interesting, but could you unpack that a little? Well, okay. So why was it interesting? What do I mean by interesting? I mean that my peers were mostly, not all of them, but some of them were pretty engaged in sort of international politics.
Yeah.
And so that was really. It was really fun for me to talk to these people who also had ideas about what should be going on worldwide.
Yeah.
It was a much broader vision than most of my classmates in South Dakota had. Yeah. I started college in fall of 2002, and so the first sort of defining experience I had at college was the drive. The lead up into the war in Iraq, and the sort of movements against that war, and so I got sort of wrapped into that. And I was in D.C. anyway, so a lot of the big protests were right there, and the first time I was arrested, the only time I've been arrested was in protest of that war.
Were you protested?
Yeah, I was in that crowd, right? We were marching against the war and trying to stop what we saw as a totally unnecessary war, which, to be fair, I think history has pretty well vindicated us in that. As even Donald Trump notes, we've spent $7 trillion now on the Middle East, and it's no more peaceful than when we started. It's arguably much, much less so. So I think it's that to me is sort of the humanitarian disaster of my generation.
And is that why you stopped? How did you get into economics?
Yeah, the anti-war stuff was maybe my first dipping my toes into activism and so on. But then I also got sort of interested in other questions of not just war and peace, but sort of justice. Yeah. I was struck at Georgetown. Most of my peers at Georgetown were rich kids, and I came from a family that was perfectly comfortable, but by no means rich. I was mostly on scholarship and so on. I quickly got drawn into these social justice types who were interested. The campaign I got most involved in that was sort of economic oriented was a living wage campaign to try to force this wealthy university that we were paying tuition to and so on, to ensure that the people who were mopping up the floors and serving us food and so on were paid a living wage. And the people the arguments that we always got against paying these folks a living wage were always sort of economic. Always we were told that, we can't do this because of economics. Yeah. And that was just that was jarring for me, but it kind of led me to be like, oh, I'd like to learn more about this economic stuff. Like, why is it that, you know, these wealthy people and their wealthy kids can't afford to you know, for an institution to pay the least off in the community for a good day's work and so on.
And so you did that, and then you did that, and then when did you leave DC?
I left in 2006. I graduated college in 2006, and then my wife and I, we spent a year living in Guatemala City at a women's co-op that produced handicraft, so fair trade handicraft. So that was the first time I'd been to another country that was not a rich other country. So that also that broadened my vision a bit. I mean, I'd say you know, it's not that often. It's really easy in life for just you know, you start to go down a certain path and just to find more experiences confirm what you already believe. But I will say, I mean, going to Guatemala, what really challenged my beliefs is I was sort of, you know, I thought that economic justice was really important and that the government had an important role in promoting economic justice. And after being in Guatemala for a year, my real takeaway was that what it takes to promote economic justice in a country like the United States might be very different from what you need in a country like Guatemala. Guatemala, the community we lived in, was just plagued by violence, and it stifled everything. I mean, it just made life in that community impossible for it to go well. People are constantly living in fear. If you got a good job, you'd be, you know, you'd get a note or a text from someone on a phone that you needed to start paying a certain amount to them every week. And you didn't know if this was like a gang that was really going to punish you for it, or if it was just someone who was trying to scam you for some money. And so all the time people were getting these, you know, if you had a business, you were taxed, but not by the government. You were taxed by the gangs that controlled the community. And I guess one of the things I learned there is that for the economy and for society and so on to work for people in this sort of community, the most important thing to get done is to solve, I mean, to end this sort of violence and to reduce this sort of crime so that people could thrive. It wasn't mostly about, like in the U.S. case, I would say, well, it's mostly about raising the minimum wage, about increasing, you know, Social Security benefits, you know, providing everyone with health insurance. But it was like in Guatemala City, like they weren't at that. They were not at that point. Like they're at the point where like they just need to not be extorted every time that, you know, something works out well for somebody. And that's an enormous challenge. I mean, you see it in Guatemalan politics that I wouldn't say that the right-wing politicians are better at reducing crime than the left-wing politicians, but the point is that the debates there are largely about are we going to be able to, you know, reduce crime.
And in that way, when you wanted to like reduce crime, did that lead you to trying to go to like, oh, maybe economics might be the right path for me to solve these problems?
Not quite. I mean, you know, it's always hard to figure out what you want to do for a career, and I definitely didn't know while I was in Guatemala, but I knew that I needed to figure it out, and that I couldn't just keep volunteering at this co-op in Guatemala in perpetuity. So I had to figure out what career path I wanted, and honestly, I chose to go to graduate school in economics, mostly because I was still interested in the economy, which is a terrible reason to go to graduate school in anything. But I mean, it ended up working out well for me, and I did learn a little bit more about the economy, but in general, my advice to other students would be try to figure out what career you want before you figure out what schooling to do, right? And I wasn't even sure I wanted to be a professor at the time, although it wasn't totally foreign to me. My father had been a professor. But, yeah, no, I definitely didn't do it the way I would advise my own students to do it.
That's very honest. And so you did that, and then so you went to, and then how did you end up going to graduate school in Massachusetts? Yeah, so
I mean, UMass Amherst is sort of notorious for having an unorthodox economics program, and I'd already run into a bunch of this work. I mean, I'd fallen in love through it by I'd fallen in love with this book written by Julie Shore called The Overworked American that I'd read in a history class, I think. But she was an economist who was trained at UMass, but I didn't know that. But after reading that, I sent her an email about how much I liked the book and how interested I was in similar lines of thought and so on. And she sent me, she very kindly responded to this person who wrote her out of the blue and gave me sort of a reading list of things to look at.
Wow. That's awesome.
And a lot of those folks were connected to UMass. And then I talked to some of my other professors. One of my professors told me, oh, you'd be the sort of person that would like studying at UMass Amherst. That's where the weirdo economists are.
Really?
Okay. And so I applied to a bunch of other schools, and I got into some other too, but I got into UMass, and that's where I most wanted to go, so I went.
Okay, yeah. Why was it weird?
Well, UMass in the 70s, the UMass econ department was taken over. It was a bunch of Marxists joined the UMass econ department in the 70s, and so it's been a department. Economics is largely a discipline that celebrates or apologizes for capitalism, I would say. And UMass Econ's always been, well, at least since the 70s, has been sort of a critical voice in some of these debates. So that's why I say it's weird. Economics is mostly, right? Most of economics, you talk to people, what's an economics course about? And they'll be like, well, money, about profit, stuff like that. But of course, that's not the only thing that can do that.
And so you went to UMass, and then, because we haven't mentioned your wife yet, and your wonderful kids. So you met your wife in at Guatemala or something?
We met in college.
So yes.
We went to Guatemala together.
College sweethearts.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yes, and then you met your wife, and then all that, and then you went to UMass, and then so when you went to UMass at graduate school, what made you want to get a PhD?
Well, I was already in the PhD. I'd applied for the PhD program. And that was sort of the plan.
Wow.
Often, so some people get a master's degree somewhere else first. But a lot of people go straight from undergraduate PhD program, and then 2 years in, or 3 years in, or something. Once you finished all your coursework, then you usually get your master's automatically. But it's sort of that's just another step. And then you're writing your dissertation to earn your PhD.
Oh,
so that's probably about half my classmates didn't have masters. They're just like me.
Wow. Okay, that's And so it didn't take you that long?
Well, actually, it did. It took me 7 years.
Oh.
But, I had some kids and so on. No, I wasn't fast, right? It's partly because I went to grad school not quite with the right... when you go to graduate school, when you go to a PhD program, you should ideally know what you want to research, who you want to research with, and what essentially you want to write, what you're going to argue in your and I didn't know any of that. I was just going and being like, oh, well, I would just want to see what interests me, and that's what I did. And it takes a lot longer if you do it that way. I don't recommend it.
Well, that's very honest. Thank you. And so you did that, and then so you went to UMass, and then so did you teach at UMass before you came to CSU? How did you get to CSU?
Yeah, no, so in graduate school, usually you do teach. Mostly I served as a teaching assistant, so other professors would be teaching big courses, and I would have 3, what we call here at CSU, recitation sections, so that would, run, and I'd grade all the students' homework and so on. I taught a few courses, just twice I taught my own course where I was doing the whole show myself. But yeah, so you get that experience teaching, but really, it was when I came to Colorado State, which is my first job out of graduate school. That's where I really sort of started teaching my own courses all the time.
And so you taught your own course. Well, how did you get into? How did you choose Colorado State?
Well, they chose me, and they offered me a job, and I thought this is the best possible life I could imagine, and I happily accepted the job. I guess. There would have been some other options to me, but Colorado State, it's a fantastic location. I was delighted to be able to move into the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. The economics department here is really, it's not as weird as UMass Amherst, but it is open, and I really like that. We have, I've got conservative and liberal colleagues, but everyone's very friendly, and we all talk about these things together, and I think people are a little bit more engaged in sort of the real world. Often economics gets pretty theoretical, but people here are sort of engaged in what it all means, and so it's just a very welcoming department in that way. We have a graduate program, which changes the nature of the job a bit, because you have graduate students who you get to research with, and you get to teach upper level courses to. And and so on, and that was something that really appealed to me as well. So I mean, when I got offered this job, I felt like I won the lottery. I still feel like I won the lottery. I mean, there's a lot of noise out there. I mean, right? I have a lot of peers who graduated from graduate school who are smarter than me, who got worse jobs, and I probably have some who are dumber than me who got better jobs. But right, it's a pretty, it's not a totally or a meritocratic sort of system, but I'm very happy with how it's shaped up for me so far.
No, that's awesome. And okay, yeah, that's pretty much it. And do you want to? Okay, yeah, we have 8 minutes, so you can pretty much talk about. Oh wait, yeah, this should be very helpful. So advices and stuff like that, because I know you gave me some advices and stuff like that, which I don't listen to sometimes, but sometimes I do.
It's probably good to get advice from a bunch of people and decide what to listen to or not.
Well, you know.
But soliciting advice that's a good.
Oh
that's
yeah,
a good step.
oh yeah, your advice are like very good actually. Like yeah, that should come out true.
Yeah, but it's not always true. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, so all right.
Yeah.
So one piece of advice I would give people is try a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Right, including try talking to a bunch of people who you might get advice from, because some of it is going to work or be interesting to you or whatever, and some of it's not. I really think if you are one of the lucky few people worldwide who get to go to a 4-year top-rate academic institution like CSU, like you should take advantage to trying a range of sorts of courses to finding out what it is that you would be most excited about doing with your life, because that's a luxury that not very many people on the planet get, but it's a luxury that our students here at CSU do have. So I really encourage students to take a wide variety of courses, try things that they don't think they're going to like. I would encourage them to join a wide variety of clubs and so on. Really, because you don't know exactly. I mean, you don't, right? I think try a sport you haven't tried before. Try an activity you haven't tried before, and just see what's out there. Because a lot of life, you'll see as you get older, is you get in ruts. I mean, you just get comfortable and you just keep on doing what you're comfortable in. And I think it's hard to consciously expand your understanding, your interests in the world. But college is like it's probably the most the easiest time to do that, because you have all these other people who are exploring too. I mean, I really think like if you don't know what you want to do when you're a freshman, sophomore, junior in college, like that's okay. Like I think coming up with finding out what you want to do is the goal, but don't just do something because you think you should.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's it. Okay. And so that's good. And then what are other things? So if people want to get into economics, or people want to succeed in like different majors, like what else would you recommend them to do? Because people could also say that I'm here to make money.
Well, I mean, there are lots of ways to make money. So even if your only interest is to make money, which I mean, I disagree. Probably shouldn't be anyone's only interest. But even then, there are lots of ways to make money. Like you might as well find out the way to make money that you're going to enjoy. I mean, making money is not the only purpose in life. So you want to make money in a way that's you want whatever you're doing all day long for the rest of your life. You'd like it to be something you somewhat enjoy. So no, you still should explore, even if you just want to make money. And I mean. And to be fair, I graduated college in a much less scary time, I think, than a lot of my students. I mean, I still have a little college debt I'm paying off, but very little compared to a lot of my students here. And I went to an expensive private university. So I had a lot less downside risk than I think some of my students here are accumulating a bunch of debt, and they're scared about whether or not they're going to get a job that pays them enough to pay that all down. And I understand. I mean, that is scary, and you absolutely should be thinking about how you're going to make that work sort of financially for yourself. And it means you can't always do what maybe you would most like to do. But even then, right, imagine you find out that you have a passion for, I don't know, like writing music or art or something that's not very profitable, right? Even if you decide that you need to choose another, more sensible, more financially sensible career path and so on, having interests besides your job is crucial to just living a happy life. So it's okay to work on developing skills that are never going to make you money. If there's something that are going to give you sort of lifelong satisfaction. And again, I think that if you don't do that earlier in your life, I think it just gets harder. So.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, and you did that, and then what do you? Let's give a promotion to CSU here.
They should give a promotion to me, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get a promotion now, because CSU. I mean, so what do you like about CSU, and what would you recommend to people about CSU and stuff like that, and as a professor here, and the people that chose you, and then you liked it, so there must be something here.
Okay, I mean, I've already said what I love about my department, and to be fair, most of my experience in CSU so far has been my experience in my department. So, there are really great things about the econ department here. The broader, I mean, look, I think a public university is potentially one of the most important institutions we have in a modern, wealthy society. I mean, like the fact that like we both can like have this conversation, like, and that like this is kind of in some way like part of my job. I mean, I think that's amazing because the exchange of information is just like it's right, or of ideas. That's such a powerful force potentially. Right? I mean, is this camera from CSU? I mean,
yes, it is.
Right? I mean, like like that sort of infrastructure, like giving everyone the ability to make a movie if they want to make a movie, or to, right? That's a powerful thing, and I guess that's what I would hope every university, and certainly every public university, would aspire to. And I'm sure there are things that we could do better at CSU and at other places. But I think that I think it's possible to get pretty jaded about the direction that I think higher education is going. Yeah. But at its core, the basic concept at its core, I think, I mean, to me, it's one of the most, it's one of the institutions, one of the most hopeful sort of institutions that we have. And I think that, we just had to continue to build on that. CSU's done it for over a century, and I think that at its best, bringing information and education and research and so on to just everyday people, and giving people a path towards the lives that they most want for themselves and for the world and so on. I think that's the most important project that we all have.
That's awesome, and let's talk about your research as well for a second. So you're doing so you got congratulations on your SOGIS thing, and you got SOGIS, and also with your I believe that's the thing, and then yes, and then so you got that, and then so now what are you researching on? And also you've researched also, people don't know about the sharing economy, those other things. So can you talk about those things as well?
I mean, so I wrote my dissertation on the sharing economy, and I think the cool thing about, by the sharing economy, I mean online platforms, like I wrote a paper about Craigslist, but you could think of Airbnb or Uber too. I mean, couch surfing. I mean, what the cool thing about these platforms, I think, is they match people who need something to something that's not being used right now. So potentially we can use technology, which is sort of weightless and doesn't require like environmental. I mean, just a few beams of information here and there to use physical stuff better. Which potentially can both be good for our living standards, right, improve the quality of life, and reduce the sort of environmental, ecological footprints that we have from all this stuff. I mean, we've just got a lot of stuff out there that's not being used very well. So I still think we can use technology to use stuff better for ourselves and the planet. I think that I've been a little jaded by some of these platforms because I mean they are ultimately capitalist firms just trying to make as much money as they can, and sometimes the greenest thing, sometimes the greenest thing, for example, or the thing that would be best, I think, for community and so on, isn't the most profitable thing. So for example, like Uber, I'm really looking forward to a future when, right now 95% of, or all cars on average sit around 95% of the time not being used, which is a tremendous environmental burden. Like, can you imagine? I mean, there's nothing else. I mean, there aren't too many other things that we build to use 5% of the time. So clearly there's a role for technology to help us share automobiles and so on better. And I think Uber and ride sharing is part of that solution. On the other hand, I think that there's no reason that we can't both use cars better and pay the people driving them around a decent wage. I don't think those are mutually exclusive. So I think, or Airbnb, I think, there are homes that are not being used, right? When I go on vacation, I I think I should be able to put someone else in my home while I'm gone.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there are sensible restrictions, maybe telling people that no, you can't just buy an apartment or take out an apartment and just start using it as a hotel, right? People don't want to live next to a hotel always and so on. So I think there's sometimes the most profitable thing isn't necessarily going to be the best thing. But that said, I mean, I'm mostly still gung-ho about the possibility of using technology for social good.
So that's awesome. And could you also talk about your research with for Sojus? What you doing?
Yeah, so there I'm working on the sort of environmental or the economic impact of a carbon tax. So this is something you know about already because I teach it when I teach Intro to Environmental Economics.
Yeah.
Right. A carbon tax. I mean, all economists support a carbon tax. No, really, all of them. I mean, it's something that brings like conservatives. I mean, conservative economists support it. Left-wing economists support it.
Yeah.
If we want to reduce how much carbon is put in the atmosphere, we're going to. I mean, without going to radically, I guess, without going to like state planning or like where we start giving people coupons to emit a ton of carbon or something like that, there's no real alternative to making people bear the full cost of what we're doing. And so a carbon tax is essentially saying when you emit a ton of carbon, directly or indirectly, you're going to pay something for it because we need to provide everyone an incentive to reduce the carbon they're emitting. Yeah. Now the problem with a carbon tax is it's a regressive tax. It burdens the poor more than the rich. But an important thing to understand is that the richest 10% of Americans emit something like 6 times as much carbon as the poorest 10%. And so if we all pay in money for every ton of carbon we emit, and if we take that money, right, that money doesn't disappear. Those are rents that the government has then collected. If we take those revenues and we give them back to people on an equal per capita basis, so everyone gets the same chunk back, which from an ethical standpoint makes some sense, since after all we do all own atmosphere in common. Right? A rich person does not own more of it than a poor person. It's our common inheritance. If you do that, then a carbon tax ends up being a program that benefits the vast majority of people in the bottom half of the distribution. And yes, it's going to cost well-off people like myself a bit, but we are precisely the ones who can afford it. And so that's something I'm looking for. I've been modeling at the national level. I'm looking forward to, as part of the Sojus Fellowship, modeling for the state of Colorado.
Awesome. And what do you have any updates? Have you done? Oh, you haven't done any research, have you?
Of course, I've done research.
Oh, you have.
But I mean, the general. I mean, one of the main things going from a national carbon tax to a state level carbon tax is some things get trickier to do. For example, there are going to be some things that move across borders that we can't reasonably tax when they come across. So, I mean, we can tax gasoline and electricity and natural gas and oil and so on, but we're not really going to, when someone imports a table